Resident Evil 9 Requiem with a new trailer that sort of dropped out of nowhere. I honestly had no idea that it's coming out, and honestly, this new trailer does not really tell us all that much.
Rude.
Despite that, it had people theorizing, and it had me theorizing. First and foremost, one of the most popular theories that I've seen floating out there, and that was even before this trailer came out, but since then this has become more prominent, that the main villain is Spencer. You know, the old guy sitting in a chair is Oswald Spencer, the one that died in Resident Evil 5. There are some explanations of how he's back, like for example the mutamyc, that he did experiments on himself with, you know, his connection that was revealed in Resident Evil Village to Mother Miranda, who was immortal. Or, you know, that he just simply back. The whole entire goal of almost any Resident Evil villain was to be immortal. So the lead theory is that he just somehow returned. And one of the quote-unquote evidences for this is the scar on the chest of, you know, the guy at the very end of the trailer, which, you know, Wesker stabbed Oswald Spencer through the chest, you know, in Resident Evil 5. But that's, you know, really the only thing. You know, of course Spencer can come back with like the Capcom shenanigans that they can pull with, you know, Resident Evil. I mean, in the very first game, Wesker got stabbed through the chest by the Tyrant and he came back. And in Resident Evil 5, he had like no visible scar on his, you know, abdomen or chest or anywhere in like the final battle where he's shirtless. And that is because when you're going to have such a, you know, enhanced healing factor, you know, giving these characters scars is not really all that important. Also, this character at the very end of the trailer seems to be undergoing some sort of mutation already. I mean, they kinda look like a Maelstrom gang member from Cyberpunk, or they might just be like really old, which admittedly Spencer would be at this time. But honestly, the voice that we can hear in the trailer, which I'm assuming is the main villain talking to Grace, that does not sound like Spencer at all. I mean, obviously he'd probably have a different voice actor than he had in Resident Evil 5, but still, just bringing him back from the storytelling standpoint seems like a step back. The franchise has been pretty consistent with Wesker being dead ever since Resident Evil 5, so bringing back, you know, a character like Spencer, who for one was not even all that important to the games. I mean, he's very important in the lore, but he was never like really a fan favorite, you know, a really big character. And while the franchise is still always circling back, you know, to its roots with, you know, Umbrella and everything, and we can see the Umbrella logo in the trailer, so it is going to play a role, I'm still more inclined to say that this is Brandon Bailey, you know, the character I spoke about in my previous video. In fact, I'm like 99%, I'm like 100% certain that this is Brandon Bailey. Simply because Elisa, despite her main game being Resident Evil Outbreak, is also very briefly mentioned in Resident Evil 7, where she wrote like an article about like the mysterious disappearances regarding, you know, the Baker family. We know that Lucas had a connection to the Connections, which, you know, is a terrorist organization that Brandon Bailey founded. So I'm willing to bet that Elisa was probably, you know, pretty close to discovering who is behind the Connections. She was, you know, close to finding out the truth. This is why Brandon Bailey had her killed. And lastly, my last piece of evidence why this is more likely Brandon Bailey than Spencer. This guy literally just stands up. But you know, anything can happen. I do not think it's Spencer, but let's move on. The hooded figure. I noticed about this guy something. You know, underneath like the coat and everything, he's wearing what seems to be like a normal basic white shirt. And think about it for a second. Who in the franchise wore a basic white shirt and had his entire face hidden, with only his mouth being like slightly visible to the player? And it sounds crazy, so I'm just gonna throw it out there as, you know, an idea. Ethan Winters.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
I know how it sounds. I personally made fun of people who said it was going to be Leon, so you know there is really no way that this would be Ethan either. But just from like a character design perspective, it seems strange for this, you know, this figure to be wearing specifically a white shirt. You know, just imagine you're like designing a character, you're designing a villain, you're making him wear a hood, you know, you want to make him real like mysterious and scary and all that, but you make him wear a white shirt. It just seems very specific. I mean, he could be wearing like a black t-shirt, you know, something that's easier to like make and hide and everything, but he's wearing a white shirt. I'm calling it right now. This is something to look out for. Obviously, this is not probably Ethan himself. We do know that the Renwood incident is happening around 2020, which is after Resident Evil 7, but before Village. And mind you, again, the Ethan we see in Resident Evil 7 and Village is not actually Ethan. He dies at the very beginning of 7, and the Ethan we play as is almost like, you know, his clone version, you know, a molded clone of him. So what if there were two Ethans made that day? Whenever I'm talking about Requiem, I always come up with some like clone theory that Grace is a clone, you know, that someone is a clone. And you cannot really blame me given the nature of Resident Evil. If there is any merit to the Ethan theory that, you know, it might be a clone, my bet is that it is some sort of a clone, but has no memories of, you know, Ethan Winters, of who he was, or, you know, whatever, so that way he'd be easier to manipulate. And again, because Lucas was connected to the connections, it'd be easier that way for Bailey to get his hands on this clone of Ethan, and you know, he'd be a useful asset because Ethan was pretty much immortal. So I think this version of Ethan, if that's the case, would probably have some similar powers to him. Whatever the case is, look out for a character wearing a white shirt in a Requiem. Another theory is that this is Bailey himself, because when he stands up in the trailer we can see that he's wearing this black coat, like the same one that, you know, this hooded figure is also wearing. I'm against this theory simply because the way these trailers have been structured for the past few games, the main sort of villain never gets all that much, you know, screen time on them. It's always someone operating like in the background. For example, in Resident Evil 7, the main focus in the trailers were the bakers, you know, mainly Jack, while the main villain was, you know, in the background it was Evelyn, you know, the grandma. In Village, the trailer focused mainly on Lady Dimitrescu and Heisenberg, while the main villain was really Mother Miranda. Here we can see a variety of monsters in these trailers. I wouldn't really say that the hooded figure gets all that much screen time. It's more like the, you know, the creature that we saw in the gameplay trailer that chases around Grace, that Capcom seems to be really pushing with this game. But the hooded man also keeps reappearing always, and it's someone coated in mystery. I'd still say he's not the main villain. He's only working for Bailey, while Bailey is going to be, you know, the big bad. Probably the phase we see at the end of the trailer is him. There are some other things of interest in this trailer. For example, in this one scene we can see like someone mutating or something. We can only see their hand and their pants actually, and their pants, they do not really look all that familiar. Could it be the hooded man? Could it be someone else? I do not know. We can also see Elisa's death. You know, she dies in the fire of what I'm assuming is the Renwood Hotel. You know, very sad. We can see a mansion that we knew was sort of going to be there before, but now we can see like the whole mansion from outside. Which, you know, Resident Evil and their mansions, which again brings me to say that this is Bailey's mansion, because as we know, Spencer had his mansion in Resident Evil 1, then also Marcus had a very similar looking mansion in Resident Evil 0. You know, Resident Evil, they love reusing their assets. Alex Wesker in Revelations 2, which Alex Wesker, another character that should return. I gotta show this because I love Alex Wesker. She needs to make a reappearance. She also had like a mansion level in Revelations 2. And there are other things, but I really only wanted to focus on this, what I consider important. Anyway, let me know your theories about Resident Evil Requiem. I do believe I'm 100% correct because I'm a genius and I can read these trailers when they come out. I understand these games very thoroughly, so if you want 100% correct assessments of these games, do not forget to like and subscribe. And hopefully I will see you next time. The S stands for silly, the greatest Resident Evil creator, out.